So I'm not an avid manga reader. I tend to prefer anime. However, I recently stumbled upon Vinland Saga while searching for an anime about the Viking Age. That part of history is particularly fascinating to me, and I rather enjoy TV shows about it. I watched Last Kingdom and History Channel's Vikings religiously. Needing my next fix of Viking shows, I wondered if anime could provide. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything, but I read about Vinland Saga, and saw that it started in 2005, with no anime even speculated by any official sources. I concluded that I would either have to read this manga or never see this material at all, at least not for a long time. I decided to get reading, and long story short, I was hooked. Everything from the art and the brutality of the action, and even the political and social intrigue on the level of Game of Thrones, and I found myself caught up to the manga in about a week or so. I know that isn't particularly fast, but for me, someone who doesn't really care for reading manga, that's like super fast. So it speaks to how good Vinland Saga truly is. However, as much as I would love to, I don't plan on fanboying over this series in this video, but rather I want to discuss one theme that I caught on to while reading this manga. Behind all the brutality and the political scheming, there was one underlying message that seemed to echo throughout many of the major characters of this series. People don't always get the ending they deserve or want. One thing that seemed abundantly clear is that nothing ever seemed to go as anybody had planned or calculated in this series. Despite some of the more fantastical elements of the series, such as the insane fights or the one-man armies, the result of the characters' actions seemed to always be the most real thing to happen to any of them. The characters don't usually get the results or the endings they expected or deserved. Such is life and such is history. Despite all the planning we do, life tends to be unpredictable and finds a way to throw you for a loop even when you thought you had everything on lockdown. And in history, think about all the dictators and war criminals who got to live out the rest of their days without ever being questioned or punished. Those people never got the justice that most of the international community thinks they deserve. And in a contrast to that, think about all the major figures throughout history that seemed to have everything under their control before something unexpected happened. From Frederick Barbarossa drowning in a river on the way to the Crusades, to the world of sports where Len Bias, the possible future of basketball, died of an overdose mere days after being drafted into the NBA. Every field and profession can ponder the same thing. More than anything, I feel like Makoto Yukimura is communicating how loose the ideas of justice and being deserving of something really is. Despite all of our deliberation, planning, and anticipation, the world more often than not deals you a different hand. Discussing the major characters and how this was communicated through them, I want to start with my favorite character, Askeladd. Askeladd, having known of his mother's cruel fate at the hands of the Norsemen, trained, traveled, and schemed his way throughout the rest of his life after taking revenge on his father who had made his mother's life hell. After a lifetime of feigning ignorance and reluctantly accepting the Viking lifestyle, and killing and plotting to try and raise Prince Canute into the future leader he wanted for Britain, which had been riddled by invasion and occupation since the days of the Romans, all things seemed to be going well until he had reached the court of King Svein Forkbeard in Denmark. Askeladd did not take the possibility of Svein invading his native Wales into account and was seemingly pinned down. This one miscalculation on his part led him into an ultimatum by King Svein, telling him that he was either going to lose Canute or lose Wales. Askeladd decided that in order for him to choose neither, he had to trade his life, and executed Svein. Askeladd paid with his life to get the last laugh on King Svein, who had taunted him, while in the same vein, King Svein paid the price for underestimating the lengths Askeladd would go to be rid of him, and tempting fate with his taunt. Svein didn't take into account the desperation he had created by taunting Askeladd in the first place and overestimating his influence, while Askeladd's miscalculation and subsequent desperation means he will never get to see the king of his vision grow up into a man. Thorfinn watched his father get shot down dishonorably after he had beaten Askeladd in a duel. Thorfinn trained, joined the ranks of Askeladd's army, reluctantly took orders, and tried to get revenge on Askeladd for almost 10 years. However, in the end, someone took the kill from him. Thorfinn's training and brooding never turned into the revenge he wanted, leaving him devoid of purpose in life for a long time. Instead of killing Askeladd and attaining the closure he wanted, it got robbed from him, and his inability to process this led him to making a mistake, striking the king and being made a slave. Thorfinn was on a path set for revenge and glory as a result, but he got robbed of his purpose and his free will. The man who bought Thorfinn, Ketil, also did not get what he truly deserved in the grand scheme of things. While initially seeming to be a relatively benevolent man, offering slaves the opportunity to work their way back to freedom, and being averse to violence, he was still a man of many flaws. Katil brutally beat Arnis because of his possessiveness over her, and regardless of how nice he was to them, he still owned slaves. He owned other human beings, so this is not a man to look up to by any means. But he didn't pay for any of those things. He got to live out the rest of his days, and his punishment was more internal, as he lost Arnis and a lot of people died on his farm, and he had to deal with the solitude and guilt of those things as a result. But as is real history, he didn't pay for those heinous things with incarceration or any physical penalty. On the subject of Katil's family, his youngest son Orman was so eager to impress Canute and the other noblemen that he ended up playing into the hands of Canute, not taking into consideration how his actions could affect his family, since he is the son of Katil, Katil being one of the richest and most influential men in Denmark, and the family members of Katil naturally having a lot of eyes on them as a result. Orman's brash and outspoken attitude gave Canute the perfect opportunity to exploit to seize the Katil farm, and for Orman, his actions, with the intended purpose of winning the respect of others and being recognized as a warrior, directly led to a brutal conflict on his family farm, in which many lost their lives. After that, Orman decided to not pursue the way of the warrior and embraced farming, far from his projected plans or any of the results he thought he would get by being an abrasive hothead. Gudrid also didn't get what she deserved for her own bravery. Gudrid was not willing to go with her arranged marriage to Sigurd, so as a result of her decision, she has to live life on the run, away from her hometown and family. She was right to reject a relationship she didn't want to be in, but life is usually not so simple, and she couldn't go on living a normal life by not going with what she was given. In a just system, Gudrid would have every right to leave a forced relationship, and she would get legal and social support from her community. But in a village where Sigurd's family reigns supreme, and women are expected to take the card they're dealt, such a thing was not possible for Gudrid. So as a result of her decision, she had to leave, go out to sea, and potentially never see her family and friends in the village ever again. Although she had wanted to go out to sea in the first place, the unfortunate reality is that she can never go back to her village unless she finds a way to reconcile with Sigurd, and to find a way that doesn't compromise her act of self-liberation. Hild had brooded over the death of her father via Thorfinn, but once she got the opportunity to take Thorfinn's life after several years of thinking about the massacre of her village and the condescending words Thorfinn said to her, she realized that taking a human's life is not as easy as the game she usually hunts, and ultimately decided to not pull the trigger, joining Thorfinn and co on their adventures. After training in her bowmanship, working on her hunting skills, and making the right alliances to get by, she had set up the perfect trap to finally get revenge on Thorfinn. Yet in the moment she found herself unable to make the decision to take a human life, and is now part of Thorfinn's traveling crew, far from the plans she had been working on for the last several years of her life. So I admire Makoto Yukimura's ability to present this idea in several different lights, with these unexpected endings sometimes being peaceful, being tragic, or being unjust, because that is just the nature of the world. People don't tend to get the endings they want or deserve, for better or for worse, reminding us how cruel and full of chance the world really is. So thanks to everyone who stuck around until this point. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back on Gintama soon. I just felt like this series needed some attention. Follow me on Twitter and or subscribe if you like my content enough. Thanks for watching and take care.